How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Set 6, and today we are going to have a little chit-chat about Sephiroth. Now, Sephiroth's been up to a fair bit of stuff in both Remake and Rebirth, but are we any closer to knowing what it is that he actually wants? What it is that he's trying to do? I don't know if we are. I think there's still a lot of room for speculation on it, so that's what we're going to chat about today. Please do like the video, subscribe for future content, do all of the things, but I suppose we should just jump into it. So this is definitely a subject that we're going to talk about more in the future, and it's definitely a subject that I want your thoughts about in the comments below. But I think the first point that we have to start at is what Sephiroth has done so far. Now, obviously, he's been messing with Cloud. He's been absolutely messing with Cloud in every single way that he can, which is just the standard Sephiroth MO. There's nothing surprising about that. We all know that Cloud is Sephiroth's plaything, and he will do what he wants with him. But the interesting point for Sephiroth comes at the end of both games, both Remake and Rebirth. First off, in Remake, at the very end of it, he goads the party into defying destiny. And what that boils down to is defying the events of the original game, changing that path. And the party is quite happy to get involved with that, quite happy to defy destiny and to gain their freedom. Aerith is adamant that Sephiroth's all wrong. And I feel like this is because this is the Aerith that's got all that knowledge, that connection with Omni-Aerith. So she still knows everything at this point, and she can tell that something's not right about Sephiroth. Another interesting thing that Sephiroth says at this point is that if this world should be unmade, so too will her children. And after just playing Remake, you would assume that he's talking about if the planet, Gaia, was to be destroyed, so would all of the people on it. That's kind of like the simple basic view of that you could take at the end of Remake. But then when you add in all of the deal with the worlds that we explore in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, this maybe takes on a bit of a different slant. It could very easily be the suggestion that if this world, the Remake world, was to end, so too would all of its children, the other worlds that have been created in the process of Remake and Rebirth. And that's something we'll come back to later when we talk about the ending of Rebirth. Anyway, we go in there, we fight the Whisper Harbinger, and then we get this big scene where Sephiroth appears in the sky, Meteor appears in the sky, and Sephiroth seems like he absorbs all of that power, all of that potential. And since Remake, it's very much felt to me like when we defeat the Whisper Harbinger, we set free all of that energy and all of that power and all of those memories of the end of Final Fantasy VII. And that would potentially include not just the power of Meteor, but the power of Holy, the power of the lifestream, everything like that. And like I say, it seems like in this moment, Sephiroth just gathers up all of that potential and just stores it in himself. Then we have a little play fight with Sephiroth, with the conclusion of that fight being Sephiroth letting us win. He lets Cloud land that final blow on him. And as soon as he does, we get that massive burst, that rainbow effect that we see so many times in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, almost as if in that moment right there, that is the moment where we defy destiny. After that, we take a little journey to the edge of creation, and we have a conversation with Sephiroth where we get a quite interesting moment where Sephiroth's just kind of staring off into space, and he says that our world will become part of it one day, but I will not end, nor will I have you end. And I feel like this could be the first real hint and suggestion of what Sephiroth's plan could be. The only two other things that we see in this scene are the universe of creation and the universe of death, and these are the two big nebulous type structures that we see in the background while this scene's playing out, and I believe that they're going to get explained to us a little bit more in part 3, and we're going to get a little bit of context as to what these are specifically. But I think one possibility is that they could literally be two of the worlds that we've seen in the process of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth especially. One of them could be a dying world, and one of them could be a world that has this potential, and that could be the Remake world itself, the one that has the potential, which would then suggest maybe the dying world could be the OG. Because, let's be real, things are still a bit of a mess. Even after Advent Children, we get to Dirge of Cerberus and things are still a mess. So it's not looking good. It's not looking good for the OG timeline in general. But after we finish with Remake, we move on to Rebirth. And Rebirth focuses on the worlds a little bit more than the Fate and Destiny aspect of it, but still Fate and Destiny and the worlds kind of go hand in hand with each other. So there is obviously some focus on Fate and Destiny. That feels like it's explored a lot more with Zack, the whole Fate and Destiny thing, and he's also a big part of the explanation of the worlds that we get and the context that we get around the worlds. But for Sephiroth especially, it becomes much more of a focus on these worlds. And by the time we get to the end of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, we get the whole scene with Sephiroth where he shows Cloud the nature of the worlds, and he talks about how all life is one within the planet's embrace, and how some of these worlds live longer than others, some of them are more stable and last a bit longer, but in the end, everything's the same. And this is one of the biggest hints for me that even though these worlds might be viewed as real or not real depending on which world you've come from, or which world you've originated at, where your perspective is, they're all the same. Anyway, Sephiroth keeps talking, and we get that line from him again about it being a homecoming, and not something to be mourned. And recently I've been thinking, what if he's not talking about returning to the planet? What if he's talking about returning to their source, the OG? Because in my mind, everything that's going on in the remake and the entire project and all the worlds that have been created afterwards is branched off from the OG world. That's what it feels like to me. So if we're going to go through a homecoming and all of these worlds die and merge back into each other, then maybe the homecoming that Sephiroth is talking about is going back to the OG. Maybe the OG is the main world that all of these other branches have come from. And interestingly, straight after he's talked about this, the line that Sephiroth says at the end of Remake that we spoke about a minute ago comes up: "Should this world be unmade, so too shall her children." And again, this is something that I think is going to come into play in a minute. But after all of this, we get to the ending, and we get to the City of the Ancients, the Forgotten Capital, and Sephiroth is there, waiting for us. And we get a scene that is very similar to the scene that we get at the end of Final Fantasy VII Remake. We see this visualization of meteor appear, we see all of this destruction, and then we see all of the whispers and the tendrils move into Sephiroth and get absorbed exactly the same as they do in Remake. And I'm honestly 50-50 on what's happening here. I don't know if it's Sephiroth gathering up loads of energy from Fate and Destiny being broken, as it is a few times throughout Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. There are moments when things go differently. Maybe that left a bit of potential energy there for Sephiroth to absorb. I don't know if Aerith being at the church and praying for Holy left him some energy that he could absorb. The one that I'm kind of thinking is, over the course of Rebirth, Sephiroth's had to take that power that he amassed at the end of Final Fantasy VII Remake and use it in order to make things go his way, in order to control Glenn and mess with Rufus, in order to do all of the things that he has done in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. But at this moment, he needs all of his power. So, he summons it and gathers it back up. And us seeing Meteor is just a visual representation to say, this is the same as then, he's gathering power. That's kind of what it feels like to me. Let me know what you're thinking in the comments below, obviously, about this and anything we've gone over so far. But yeah, this very much feels like the scattered essence of Sephiroth coming back together in this important moment. And once he's gathered up that power and made note of Aerith, like, yes, good, pray, you keep doing your thing, I'll see you in a minute, he reaches up to the sky and we see a rift open. And it feels very similar to the end of Final Fantasy VII Remake, but also different. Because in the end of Final Fantasy VII Remake, while Sephiroth has set everything up and put everything in motion, this is him just gaining power in Final Fantasy VII Remake. In Rebirth, he's already got the power, and now it's time for him to use it. So like I say, he reaches up and he opens this rift, and immediately we see lifestream start to come in from the rift. But as soon as it does, it corrupts and turns into this black-purple stuff. Yeah, stuff. Technical term. And Sephiroth refers to it as a reunion, the merging of worlds, when spite and sorrow are harvested to feed the planet. And what this makes me think is that all of the stuff that's gone on in Rebirth, the turbulent state that the world is in at the moment, you know, being on the brink of war, or, you know, I mean, we are pretty much in war at the minute. You know, there's loads of other weird things happening across the world. This is a world where there is a lot of sorrow and a lot of despair. So when the lifestream comes in through the rift that Sephiroth opens, he's able to take that sorrow and that hatred and use it to corrupt the lifestream. And by feeding the planet, I assume that he means the planet he wants, the planet he's trying to create, which is this Sephiroth Genova corrupted version of the lifestream. Anyway, after this, Sephiroth disappears, obviously heading inside the Forgotten Capital to not stab anybody, obviously. And we fight our way through some whispers, Cloud gets inside, and we get to the Aerith scene. And we see what happens. Cloud does save Aerith, but then also doesn't save Aerith. We get that weird moment where fate and destiny seems to exist in a state of flux, and both things seem to have happened. And Sephiroth is absolutely loving this. He's very happy. He talks about how it's a confluence of worlds and emotions. And the confluence of worlds things we can get to in a second, but the confluence of emotions, I believe, feeds into what I was thinking a minute ago, you know, with how these negative feelings can corrupt the livestream, or at least be used to corrupt the livestream. This is a big moment for Sephiroth, because I don't think he's looking to corrupt the livestream in this moment. I think he's trying to make sure that he pushes Cloud completely over the edge in order to corrupt him. And this is something that we've seen going on all the way through Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Sorry, a little tiny bit in Remake, but in Rebirth it's been cranked up to 11. Cloud is in a far worse state than he ever was at pretty much any point in the OG at this point in Rebirth. Obviously, he has his complete breakdown, but, like, he's not killing people at that point, so I think he's slightly better at that point than he is right now. You know, he's been a bit of a murderous shit in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. He needs to chill. He needs to chill. But I kind of feel like a big part of this, and a big part of this talk about emotions and loss, is him trying to corrupt Cloud. But not only that, he's trying to damage the party and cause this feeling of loss to grow even more than it already has done in this world. But then the confluence of worlds bit is interesting, because I think this is to do with that rift that he created at the start of all this. Because before any of this happened outside, Sephiroth created the rift. And I have a feeling that that rift is the very same rift that we see with Cloud at the end of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, right in that final scene. So it seems to me that Sephiroth's goal in this moment was to A, take Aerith out, B, mess with Cloud and really, really break Cloud, but also create this moment where, again, like at the end of Remake, fate and destiny is defied, and coupled with the rift that he's already created, it does something to reality. It breaks reality more than it did previously. I feel like this is possibly something that Sephiroth might have realised due to what's happened with Zack, and that at the end of Final Fantasy VII Remake, Sephiroth didn't have control completely of that moment, and we ended up with some unforeseen outcomes, such as Zack, and such as the white materia being split and its essence going into one of these worlds. I think there were unforeseen outcomes that Sephiroth didn't know was going to happen. Now, he's been able to observe what's happened, and has potentially figured out some way to control it and make it give him an outcome that he wants. Which, going off everything that he said, he seems to want the worlds to merge. He seems to want all of this energy to come back into one place. And if we think back to Final Fantasy VII, what was Sephiroth's big plan? Let Meteor hit the planet, and then he could be at the middle of that wound, gathering up all the energy that the planet uses to heal it. That was Sephiroth's big plan to gain all of his power. So, it isn't that far of a stretch to think that he's found an even bigger way to do that, and that is farming this system of worlds. He causes moments and sets things in motion so that fate and destiny get defied, which leads to these worlds being created, and then he actively works to bring these worlds back together. But it seems like what he's done at the end of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is slightly more far-reaching in the sense that it will directly impact the remake world, or at least it seems like it will directly impact the remake world. We haven't actually seen anything since the scene with Aerith in the Forgotten Capital that suggests which world we are in. And given the focus that we've seen in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth on the worlds, I think it's something that we could do with figuring out and knowing, like, which world are we in that final scene. I mean, the assumption would be that we're in the Beagle world, you know, the same one that we've been in Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth. But if that's the case, that means that this world is almost certainly not the OG timeline. It means that it is almost certainly one of the worlds. And the OG timeline itself could be also one of a big system of worlds. We don't know exactly how that's going to pan out, but I would say at the very least, the OG happened and Remake was branched off from the OG. And everything that's happened outside of Remake and Rebirth then comes from the OG. So we'll view the OG as the parent world at the end of all of this. And if we're seeing a rift in the world that we're in Rebirth, and that world is still the Beagle world, then that suggests to me that the Beagle world doesn't have long left. Maybe a game. Yeah, maybe a game. It'll last for one more game probably, which is convenient. So then the final question for all of this is, why? Why is Sephiroth doing this? What is the plan? What is the thing that he's shooting for in the end of it? And more and more recently, I've always kind of been of the opinion that Final Fantasy VII Remake takes place after Advent Children. That's always been my stance. Final Fantasy VII Remake takes place after Advent Children. Not chronologically, of course, but it's a post-Advent Children Sephiroth that we're dealing with, or at least his consciousness that we're dealing with in Remake and Rebirth. Because in Remake and Rebirth, we've still not actually seen a real physical body of Sephiroth. And I think that's why things haven't gone massively on a tangent yet and gone crazy, because we're still dealing with the consciousness of Sephiroth, be it a future consciousness, an Advent Children consciousness, an in-between OG and Advent Children consciousness, or the consciousness that's the Sephiroth in the North Crater. Whichever one of them it is, all we've seen is Sephiroth either appearing in visions to Cloud, or controlling one of those black cloaks and puppeting it around. We are very quickly reaching the point where we're going to go to the North Crater and we're going to give the black materia to the real body of Sephiroth. And if there's any other moment in this game where shit could go super crazy, I don't know what it is. Because then the body of the real Sephiroth, the actual physical manifestation of Sephiroth in this world, will be connected. And we all saw what Aerith was like when Aerith was connected to her Omni-Aerith self. She ended up so much more powerful. She was able to mess with the portals that Sephiroth put in place with just like the wave of a hand. She knew what was going on. She was confident about everything. We could be on the verge of seeing the same thing happen with Sephiroth. And that'd be pretty rough. Cloud would probably be in danger at that point. And I feel like that could potentially end up being the moment where Sephiroth is able to fully leverage all of the power that is amassed as we're going through Remake and Rebirth. But again, it comes back to the point I was making. Why? It has to be he's not happy with the way things have gone. Be it post-OG or post-Advent Children, whichever one it is. I'm starting to think more and more that it is in between the OG and Advent Children. Because they do keep saying, don't worry, everything's going to add up to Advent Children. They've said it numerous times. And I feel like the easiest way for that to be the case right now, other than just forgetting all of the changes and delivering Part 3 as a straight-up remake of the OG, that'd be one way of doing it. But the only way that I can see it happening now, with all of the changes and stuff that we've had in Remake and Rebirth, is that the remake project is, and I've said this before, a manifestation of lifestream White and Black. Because that is the struggle that goes on between Aerith and Sephiroth after the OG and before Advent Children. And it'd be pretty quickly after the OG as well. I mean, it'd be potentially something that happens during Meteorfall, because we all know that geostigma spreads during Meteorfall when the lifestream comes to the surface. It could also be something that happens after Geostigma's already spread though, and just kind of reinforces that corruption within the lifestream, and then leads us to Advent Children, where Sephiroth in the Remake project will have gathered up some strength by doing all this stuff that he's doing in Remake and Rebirth, and then he has that one final struggle with Cloud, gets defeated again, Advent Children ends. Don't get me wrong, it could still be a Sephiroth from post-Advent Children, and it'd just be a new story setup that we've not seen before, but it does feel very Lifestream White and Black to me, and if that's the case, it's probably going to be in between the OG and Advent Children. So yeah, long story short, Sephiroth did something in order to create this remake branch of the world. He then baits the party into Defying Destiny, which gives him a load of power. He then uses this power to mess with the world even further and unbalance it even further, all at the same time while unbalancing Cloud and destabilizing him. And then at the end of Rebirth, he does the same thing that he did at the end of Remake by creating this moment where fate and destiny is broken, but he's done a bit of setup this time, and he's created this rift in the sky. And this rift is something that I believe is the rift that Cloud can see at the end in that final scene. So Sephiroth's done something that's tainted this world now. And the only suggestion that we've seen is that when one of those rifts in the sky appear, the world's in danger. I personally think that that means that this world is going to cease and merge back into its parent world, which is probably the OG. But it could also mean that this is the OG world, things have been changed, and this is just a sign, like the geese are, the sky being sundered, the earth shaking, all that sort of business. Maybe Cloud is seeing the first symbolism of that. But, I mean, that could just be exactly the same thing, if you know what I mean. Like, that could just be the process, whether it's a world or the main world, because the main world might have branched off from another world, and it's all about perspective. This is it, it's a very perspective-based thing. The people in the Remake world will think, no, this is definitely the main world. Whereas the people in the OG world would be like, no, this is definitely the main world. Everyone would be like, no, my world is definitely the main world, because perception works like that. But when you get people like Cloud, and now Zack, and Aerith, and Sephiroth, it seems like that perception changes and becomes more malleable, because they seem to be operating above that system. At least Sephiroth and Aerith are. Zack and Cloud have kind of been puppeted and pulled through it and thrown around between worlds, but Aerith and Sephiroth are definitely operating on a higher level. Anyway, I've rambled about this for 20 minutes now. Basically, Sephiroth's not happy with how things panned out, and he's trying to absorb power in the same way that he was at the end of Final Fantasy VII, to some end. Either to lead into Advent Children and the whole Geostigma crisis, or after the Geostigma crisis, and who knows what. Who knows where it goes if that's the case. I'm starting to feel like it's in between the OG and Advent Children more and more, but there's a lot of Advent Children imagery that's been used throughout the project, so maybe not. Let me know what you're thinking below. Is it between the OG and Advent Children, or is it after Advent Children? And also let me know what you think about Sephiroth, what you think his plan could be, why you think he's doing the things that he's doing, because it is all very much up in the air. At this stage, I'm still kind of speculating and just throwing some loose ideas out there, so I'd absolutely love to hear what you think. We'll probably do a commenters video to this. There will be a commenters video coming up for the Clay Materia video. I'm going to get that done in the next few days, so keep an eye out for that. But yeah, let me know what you're thinking about Sephiroth, what he's doing, why he's doing it. Also, please do like the video, subscribe for future content, but more importantly than all of that, have a great day.